So the data is there already. Unless you have rules and strict commandments on how to use the data, the ethical considerations do not enter into the mind of us, because we don't know that this data is being used already. If there are no clear rules, it's an open ball game. And the data is there, so I think it helps us, creates less of a chance of there being foul play.
Has he answered your question
Yes.
satisfactorily?
Which is around methods of data collection. So I can see some clustering methods, classification and layering. There's satellite communications if you're using that for mobile data gathering and all of that. And the second question is really around encryption and decryption protocols. You mentioned, I think towards the end of your presentation, that you essentially, I don't know, you're encouraging Nigerian regulatory bodies to be the ones to manage that encryption, decryption protocol with these companies. So are you proposing like a legal framework for that? Because I don't know if that's in place yet. So those are my two questions.
You want to go for second portion? But in the absence of a fresh face, okay, we'll come back.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Mustafa Otaru from MTN Nigeria. She actually took all my use of CDR. I'm concerned really about a lot of apps and other OTTP services that are in the mobile phones or in our smartphones. And again, the smartphone also have a lot of sensor, multi-sensor elements that can generate data. So how do you handle those encryption, and how does it affect the integrity of your data? Then again, talking about, she mentioned the issues around regulators. In your experience as well, how have the regulators supported or support your research and all your data analysis, and how the general response from that angle, looking at where we are in Nigeria, how our industry is seriously regulated by
Asking us the question.
I make a little clarification. Every time you turn on your mobile device, it goes to the tower and says, I am here. It gives those information, and the tower at that time knows that a certain phone is present here. So what we need to just consider is those three sets of data are collected at a particular time. It just knows that there's a phone here. It doesn't know who is there, but there's a phone there. And then the phone moves to Nike, and the phone moves to Apple, and the phone moves to Nasarawa. And then outside, a lot of exchanges. Now, in the evolution, as you go to 5G, more information is collected, which is what I alluded to in the beginning, to make proposals to fix how the phone is built itself. So what may happen is data will be collected one way or the other, and it is already being collected. Google knows where I go every day. I have history for about a year. And you may not be aware of it, but Google still knows where your phone is and where you go to your village and all of that, as of right now. Yes. So, for us, the OTPs you mentioned, WhatsApp also knows where you are and can analyze it. We don't read the log agreements. And overall, it's going to be possibly about the environment, energy, population, health, education, all of those metrics, and several use cases will be available. MTN has that data right now. It's sitting. It can inform the police, the military, can inform transportation, it can inform vaccine distributions, and all of that. Now, it's just now a matter of how it will be done, because it's already there. Let me also clarify what he mentioned regarding the Intel processor. Now, can't tell who is there. No personally identifiable information is there. So you can't say it's Usman, but you know there's a phone. The phone is moving, 10 million phones move between Abuja and Kano every summer. So this is value for people in transportation, airlines, people moving people, you know what amount of Zobo will be consumed or Coca-Cola will be consumed. It rolls off. But ultimately, the OTPs will either take over this by themselves without being regulated, or we can be proactive to put something in place. To be proactive, we may need to consider the ITU key track or regulations on our part in our space here. But either way, we are going to get overrun if we don't put in some barricades. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's all correct. And in support of that, I think the ITUT is also the department. ITUD is the department that is handling the ITU big data project. That I had one slide about it, where they analyzed big data in 5 different countries. So we were the ones that. How have the regulators around the world supported this idea? And the ITU project for measuring big data and ICT statistics with this data, it's led by the regulators. So in every country, Kenya, Georgia, UAE, Philippines, Colombia, the regulator is the contact point for the International Telecommunication Union. And they were the ones that were managing the project on the ground. So in Kenya, the Minister of Communication was the one that was most responsible for this project. So they are supporting it fully, and the IT project also shows that if you get the regulator involved, the access to this data is easier than it has been before, because we've been in this field for a long time, and only in the recent years has this data being collected by public organizations. Somehow it always ends up not working. The data doesn't seem to be working, and now we have some clues on how to make this work. Get the regulator involved, statistical office involved, and they can provide their support, because it can also be useful information for the regulator itself for their own work. So in terms of the encryption protocols, this is something that can be in place, and this is the most secure solution you can have when the processing is isolated inside the hardware, so you don't know anything about the person. All the protocols for processing have been set in stone, and the processing takes place in the hardware without people manipulating it in any way. So that's the final step. Maybe hacking into the hardware, it cannot happen. It's so the encryption. The encryption. So the level of encryption in the Intel SGX chip does not allow it. That's one thing. The other thing that in there if this protocol is used, the way it's distributed inside the hardware on different chips, it's mathematically distributed in different places, and if you hack into one of the areas of the chip, you get data, but it doesn't tell you anything, because the data only works when you connect it to all the others.
So it's very similar to like a blockchain distributed ledger
Yes,
protocol.
it's like it's kind of like that, but inside the chip. So yeah, it's very, very hard to decrypt it. And some of the other questions will be answered actually in the next session. And in terms of the regulatory support here in Nigeria, I think you will hear about it in the next session. Right, Ben?
But if we have more questions for you, we will take them. Ladies and gentlemen, am I the only one who noticed that our security personnel, they just kept quiet? As if they are taking everything in, immediately
I've seen the presentation talking so much of the use of the mobile data in capturing tourism flows, inbound, outbound, and domestic. I'm a little concerned, probably I may not be very versatile in the digital language, but I'm concerned about the use of the mobile data system in capturing information, inflow and outflow of tourists into Nigeria, considering the porous nature of the border, considering also the informal nature of the economy of this country, particularly as it affects the domestic tourism. My friend there spoke, if I understood what he was saying that the capturing done by the masts are basically the telephone itself, not necessarily the individual carrying it. And we are worried also in the area of if a tourist coming to Nigeria, we are not just interested in the person, we are interested in the way he spends his money, where he moves, what interests him, what attracts him to Nigeria, how many days he stays, and things like that. So how does this mobile system help us in getting this information, particularly in the area of the expenditure pattern of the tourists, what interests him, where he stays, whether he's staying with a friend, whether he's staying in a hotel, or a guest in, or things like that. Can that be applied, and how do we do that? Thank you.
Accessing their private informations. If I can remember, we attended one conference last 2-3 weeks. I even wonder when I see most of the people using WhatsApp cannot read and write. They are just using recording, talk less of knowing the negative impact of accessing their own private information. How do you think that your own company can explain to them, and how does NIDA can tackle that issue, since the level of the users don't know even the negative impact of what they are accessing, please?
Apart from the immigration at our borders, which big data could be used there, is there another area that NDAs could benefit from this big data? Thank you.
And the nature of human interaction is around the world and can be used, it can be scaled globally. One is mobile data, the other is satellite data. And those two in combination, it's wonderful. Because one gives you the spread of the human infrastructure, the other gives you the spread of the people. The state of how we use satellite data is normally used.
So much as it spread, where they came from, including our visitors from the States. I also noticed that quite a lot of focus was on tourism. So my presentation is going to take us a little bit more back home, in terms of the applicability of mobile position data across sectors of the Nigerian economy. We did that. In order for us to do that, we set up questionnaires. By the way, my name is Ben Ewa. I'm so sorry. I always forget my name. It means exhaustive, but we try to look at or consider a broad array of potential users. Of course, as you can observe in the room here, we sent questionnaires to organizations in the military and as well as paramilitary, private telecoms operators, MDAs at the federal level. We also sent questionnaires to development agencies. And the reason is because the Nigerian governments or operators are not the only ones interested in this data. Earlier on, mention was made of the Director General of the World Trade Organization who was in Nigeria. I came across his information about his visit on Twitter, where he specifically asked for Nigeria to invest in tourism statistics or other ways of generating tourism statistics. That was how he put it. Of course, we have an organization, a central organization for statistics management in Nigeria. I'll come back to your question later on. Now, the idea of this is not to replace existing data, but as much as possible to use this new data source to provide more clarity to existing methodologies where possible. And then of course state and regional governments and research institutions. We're expecting some people from some nearby universities. And the reason it's instructive. For us to succeed in this push in the long run, we need to have the support of the education sector, particularly the universities, to support research, to develop skill base, and to support this endeavor. This is kind of like validates some of the discussions we've been having, even after the earlier session. There are lots of privacy issues, or rather concerns expressed. I think the last few questions from the audience around regulations, what kind of policies were in place, and so on, apart from infrastructure that was mentioned, technology. When it comes to exposure of business secrets, even though we are referring to a completely different environment, it often brings me back to, what we are used to in the public service, where we always have open secrets, files and so on. But the secrets are very well known. And then value for money. Yes. Strong desire, to explore, a new way to monetize that data. But it is not, so it's mentioned as a low obstacle because it hasn't been exploited. Okay. Indicated that a very small percentage use MPT at the moment. And I think that I can confidently say that for now, such users are mostly in the intelligence community. Right. But I think later on I'm going to explain the difference between what they are doing using now and what we talked about that exhaustively in the previous session. And then a lot are not using it, but they express a need, strong need to know more about it, how they can use it. access to data to constitute a significant issue. And I think, like I said, someone asked, how do we get this data? We know this data resides in the telcos, but how do we get it? So that is, an issue too that was common across the responses. As I said earlier on, most of the use is around security. That is from the mobile network operator now. Some of the operators want to use that data to better understand their market footfalls. So be able to know how they can improve on the current business drivers. All right. So that is one clear area of use, of value rather. So they are, significantly interested in the additional ways they can put that data to use, besides enhancing what they are doing now. Getting more people connected, enhancing the quality of their service, and so on. And then they also, for the mobile network operators, use it to provide statistics of their operations to the regulator, NCC. So if you go on the NCC website, there's a lot of information. I think statutorily they are expected to provide that information. There was a common sense consensus around the absence of a general government strategy. And I thought that point was significantly mentioned earlier on. Players or stakeholders can take advantage that there's no business value. As I said earlier, capacity is critical. For us to a very robust capacity, not capacity really, but capacity that can, organically, support or become a spin-off of the project, especially from universities in this area of this potential business area. So, as these concerns necessarily peculiar to Nigeria, Sim said no, and I agree with him. They are not peculiar to Nigeria. We live in a very, much smaller world. So we know, for instance, about Cambridge Analytica, on Facebook. However, the reusability and where it can be located. It's easier to have access to data because we are the production agents. So once it is free on the internet, you are the factory producing it. So then low level of understanding across all categories. Apart from the knowledge gaps, in terms of MPD, there's also address our unemployment issue if we don't take advantage of new areas, such as this. And of course, addressing the skill sets. So a couple of common areas where this data can be, or domains, as you've heard, all the population, mobility, tourism. It is not, indeed, it's not about, head counts of people who come into the country and all that. It's what you can do with the data. If people find themselves in this location, or a particular location all the time, what route do they use to get there? Might that be of, significance to, city planners? Or if the assembly in one area, is that going to be, is that going to, draw the attention of the inland revenue, and so on? Or for us, for the city authorities to put more resources there because people are drawn to that area. So, people who permanently reside in an area, Sim talked about this earlier on, you can have several classifications of, of mobility. Whether we are, short-term visitors or regulars, it has significant implication on so many sectors of the economy or society. Right. Direct from Minister of Interior, you were very direct when you asked to which other areas of the Nigerian economy can this data be useful to. Let's take an area like road construction. It's huge, and roads, works, power, and so on. But there is a correlation. So in 2017, that was the budget of the ministry for roads, roads and bridges. But when we talk about the capacity to make more informed decisions, you wouldn't be wondering on what basis was the budget for roads or maintenance made. Is it because we just think that we have to connect one community to the other, or because we have to maintain the road? Now, studies from mobility could tell you that based on the the road usage, this is the lifespan of the road. This is how much you should budget for its maintenance. Or you might commission the dynamic data is take constant snapshots of a location, and you can use that, for even better planning. I give you another example. In FCT, in one of the discussions we're having with the, Wuse district, for instance, in the whole of Abuja, the last 10 years had a population growth of about 140%. So if you are using 2006 units in the district like Wuse or Misama, or even the needs of the medical, Misama General Hospital. Indeed, one of the discussions we had, the question was, the FCT authority were interested to, the health secretary said that they can't seem to provide adequate budget for Misama General Hospital. All right, based on the estimated population of the area that should serve as the user should be drawn, and the mere fact is that Abuja has a larger proportion of its population coming from outside of Abuja. So the daytime population in Abuja is significantly higher than the nighttime population. Right. So most of the people who use facilities in Abuja are not necessarily residents. In the same way, most of the people who live in Abuja move away during weekends and public holidays. And that brings me to the area of security. How would the Nigeria police, for instance, plan the distribution of resources? Are you going to be placing 5 vehicles in each area and 5 men, or you want to be able to use data like this to say, okay, at this period of the week, this is a period. This is how much resources should go to this area and so on. Or you don't need so much in this area during the weekend, and so on. So household population is maybe the right word where enumeration, yeah, and so on. You're saying that is not based on, perhaps based on, data that is 10 years late. Okay, so a combination of this data would enhance how INEC, for instance, plans its polling stations. Your polling units, sorry. I'm under 18, I don't vote, that's why. All right, okay. And same for tourism too. My home state, Cross River, prides itself as tourism destination. But we don't know how many people go to Calabar tourism every year, or where they come from, how long they stay. We don't know. Right. And that kind of information will be highly valuable to the state government, or any government that is interested in tourism. So they'll be able to know what routes to even optimize, air routes, and so on. Or whether there should be more medical facilities, in particular area because of tourism. I think all over the world, tourists have one thing in common: they want to live very comfortable away from home, right? So, let me move quickly. How might we move from just discussing the idea to something real? Much of what you have on the slide have been mentioned earlier. We need, collaboration across sectors, across stakeholders, telcos, the end users, regulators, and so on. Right. We also need, a strong, reliable legal framework. I know in NIDA we are, just as the DG mentioned, I thought his speech was brilliant, that NIDA is reviewing the data protection guidelines. Right. It's beyond recognizing this kind of data. There has to also be a strategy for harvesting this data. A strategy that addresses all the concerns and also increases the understanding of the use and benefits of the data. Technology takes time to mature. I'm saying this relative to the environment. You can have, technologies such as, what my colleague mentioned, Hadoop and so on. But relative to the environment, it's also an important issue. So it takes a combination of the skill sets, culture, to guarantee maximum dependability from technology. In terms of skills, I already mentioned that yes, we need to work with universities. There's still a disconnect between, even in the core, computer science departments, the skills that are produced and where the market is. However, one of the things we should strive to achieve in terms of skill development is a strong recognition of the multidisciplinary nature of this environment. So we are talking about skills that cut across mathematics, statistics, computer science, economics, and so on, right? If we were to succeed in this and we are partnering with universities, we want to see a situation where, there's a deliberate, push towards developing multi-disciplinary people, so that people like me who came from, a business background, should be able to use technology in a particular way. Right? But I don't think that exists right now as deliberate policy in the education system, but it has to. So, in terms of processing flow, or alternatively, it can be processed in a third-party environment, a centralized environment, particularly when you are dealing with, collection of data from multiple telcos. Right. Of course, the more data you have, the better. Right. But each of these scenarios attract different, regulatory, requirements. Right. But essentially, there has to be, centralized organizations. While NSO, we're talking about, referring to the National Statistical Organization. Right. We have NBS in Nigeria, that has a responsibility to provide statistical data across different organizations and so on. Yeah. I think I talked about this earlier already, so let me
just plan in our head, not using any data at all. I don't know how different this one is going to be, but from the experience shared in the morning, I know that if we are serious in this country, we will have a change. We'll be able to harness the potentials that are here in the network, in the mobile network. Now, I don't know whether you have considered in your initial or in this survey how this data is going to be administered. Generation is not a problem because telecoms are there. You have assured us from the morning discussion that the various telecoms generate this data. So how do you administer this data? How do you share this data? I mean, issue of infrastructure have you considered? And whatever the policy, the national, the policy framework is in place for us to sustain this initiative, as beautiful as it were. This is my concern. Thank you.
Bureau of Statistics and the Data Regulatory Agency.
I think it's around 4th or 5th. The biggest one being Czech by value, but by volume checks are lower. So internet banking is also around 6th or 7th, by value, I think it's lower than mobile banking, but by volume, okay, sorry, yes, the other way around. By volume it's higher, but by number of transactions it's lower. So there's some synergy in that financial mobile sector. So NBS and banks are working together. On the identity side, I think Engineer Kabir is at the back there. They work with the NIMC on that. You can check more later on it. For the policies, I think because it's cross-disciplinary, cross-portfolio, there are things you can put together, but there are things that may not fit together because of different contexts, different levels of legislation, jurisdiction, and when you come together, everybody brings his own paper, and then editing those papers is the point. But I think Engineer Kabir can help us with clarification on the data side of the UC work.
Engineer Kabir, sir, do you want to make the
But there has been a committee set up by the president, by this current administration, that has been working on harmonizing all these various silos that you've identified, the NIMC, the FRCN, the FAC, the National Corp. So they are all working together to see how all this data could be harmonized, and a lot have already been put in place, and it's ongoing. Thank you.
I think, one of the issues, there are 3 issues raised in the e-government development index of 2016, which of course, number 1 is policy integration for sustainable development, anyway, policy integration, whole of government, and also big data analytics. I believe in my mind that big data analytics is very, very important, and it's just that the way to go about it is just the challenge. And if you know, government across the world actually own the data, really, compared to the private sector, own most of the data, if you understand that. And thirdly, is the issue of our own context here as a country. Now, we have our own peculiarity, which of course, Mr. Ben has actually addressed in his presentation, anyway. Looking at number 1, the issue of enabling environment for data itself in terms of opening up data. There's supposed to be a kind of guidelines that will actually tell us how the data is going to be used and by who and when. All those details has to be actually analyzed, then followed by, firstly, it's supposed to be a kind of policy directive, then followed by the guidelines, and also in terms of the strategy, it's talking about putting up a lot of strategy to ensure the success of those issues. That's one, in terms of enabling environment. The second one is actually technology adoption. We know technology adoption is critical from, identified by more in terms of innovators, down to early adopter, down to late adopter and the laggards. So how do we move from these stages to institutional issues is critical on how do we want to open this data? Are we ready to open the data? So those are the things that are very critical. Then talking about infrastructure itself and in terms of trust, privacy, and other issues that are being addressed. Now, looking at our own context from where we are coming from now, what we are, the baseline we are, I would like to direct this question to Mr. C from Estonia. Probably there is needs, we did have infrastructure and all this, but we need to move ahead. We need to move from where we are. And we can't say because there's no enabling environment, there's no infrastructure, the adoption rate is low and all that. How do we now move? Model that can take us from where we are, because it's very important for us to achieve sustainable development. 3 things are actually mentioned, which of course big data is actually part of it. I think I will have to stop here and direct our questions because I have a lot of things to do.
I think what we need to understand is that as new data sets are discovered, they don't replace old ones. Neither do they, completely, extinguish, old issues, particularly those that are non-technology, right? So, the data that NMC is handling now is different from the kind of data we are addressing here. It's different. However, the issues, around how we may be able to develop this potential are also different, in terms of how we have, navigated, with the old data around, citizen identity and so on, right? Now you're talking about data that is that resides with the telcos, right? You're also talking about data that it's not very clear in terms of who owns it. Yes, it resides with people not utilizing data. I think I wouldn't want to say that it's cultural. Perhaps it is. However, this data might be such that we need to put its value in front of everything else, right? So while you may not force a state or an MDA to use it, but the beauty of the environment we are increasingly being part of is that nothing is open. Nothing is closed anymore. You're right. And just as when I participated at the Open Data Partnership program a couple of weeks ago, one of I said to the gathering is that the availability of data more than anything else is strengthening democracy, particularly civic participation. So, and again, this is to address your concern about how this data may be disseminated, right? So this data is now available to non-state agents who can use it to influence the actions of state agents. That's the difference. So when you have data that is resident in NPOPC or NIPSI, and cannot be used unless they make it out there, it's different, right? So the outcomes of the MPD should be such that MJ should have access to it. On the other hand, that through APIs and results, surveys, and so on. On the other hand, third-party agents can use their APIs to develop further solutions for specific sectors. So I want to see a situation where, rather, I hope to see a situation where some startup may use this data and say, okay, because they are interested, they are operating in the healthcare space, they use it to develop solutions for maybe a small community or it's a local government, and so on, right? So that is where I see, some kind of differences as well as some hope in terms of how we might accelerate the adoption of this data. In terms of policy frameworks, they are not adequate, and I thought we emphasized that there's
Coming to be with us and for sitting through all this. And on that,
distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my role is very simple, is to show appreciation. And you all agree with me that the event of today has been very, very insightful. In the sense that we are working together as stakeholders to move this country forward. The role of ICT in sustainable digital development cannot be emphasized. And I know that we all agree that we all have a role to play. We'll be talking of major component, which is the data of big data, which is a very big resource for us in this country.
But if you have this as a resource, look at what we can do to assist the present administration in addressing some of the challenges we have to drive. We are happy to know that this is just emerging in Nigeria. Our friend from Australia reminded us that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. All we need to do is to leapfrog and catch up with countries that have done a lot of work in this area. Yes, there will be challenges I've mentioned in terms of resources, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of even understanding the role that big data can play in our economic diversification. We are glad to say that we have opportunity now to leapfrog. All we just need to do is to properly look at what we have in the country, look at where we want to go, look at how to get there, and map out our own strategy for us to be able to get there. And we believe not for leader alone. We want to really address the problems that we have in this country. We need to work together as a team. Contribute our quota in any way that we think you have expertise. For instance, something came up about NIPSI. Thank God that we have capable people from NIPSI that were able to give insight to what they will do. My brother here was already saying that NIPSI was tough. And the Gafapala there rose and he gave us, he solved a lot of problems. And that is true that a lot is going on in this country that we don't even know. And that is why it's good for us to come together occasionally, share information, talk to ourselves, receive feedback from stakeholders that we can take very easily for us to move forward whatever we want to achieve. Now coming to the vote of where we're about starting, is presently attending an emergency board meeting. And you know the board members, when they call you as a CEO, if you like yourself, it's better you go. They would at night. If you don't go in the meet without you there, anything can be done, anything can be taken against you. So I'd like to apologize on his behalf. And would like to specially thank our friend from Estonia who flew purposely for this workshop. He came in 2 days ago and he told me this is the third time we visited Nigeria. I was even teasing him about Lagos, that I should go to Lagos and see what is happening. Not knowing that he had a picture to show to us what is happening in this country. We really appreciate you for coming and for the presentation you made, which I believe to a large extent has broadened our scope, our understanding about the journey we want to embark on. Thank you very much. And I don't know if I should thank our consultant. We will pay your bills. But it's a very serious dose. This is one project that is pushing for a very long time. He's really interested in it, and it shows the level of understanding that he has about what we can achieve with data in this country. And we thank God that this is coming up today. We appreciate you for the research you've done, for the beautiful research. You will tell us where we are and where we want to go and how to go there. Thank you very much. To all the participants from different organizations, without you, we can't say we've had any successful workshop. And for all the comments you made, at the time I was even telling the MC that one of these leader people, they should not be commenting. this event is not for leader people, but to a very large extent, you agree with that we have capable people in-house that go to anywhere, speak authoritatively, and make good input. Really appreciate you for your input. And to the consultant, the MC, we want to appreciate all of you. And I think I should not end this speech without thanking our headmaster, who has sent all of us here to present our direction, where we're going to agency. That is the DG of leader. I will thank him and thank you back to him to say that all the participants said we should thank you for doing a good job. And we really appreciate all of you. We wish all of you that are traveling from different places safe trip back. Thank you very much and God bless.
O God of creation, direct our noble course, guide our leaders right, help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and live in just and true. Great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. Amen. Lunch is served, and as is indicated on your meal ticket, it's at the booker. Thank you.